I did a pop up live earlier and the conversation got kind of turned around. So I thought I would do another pop up live. And it's just what the title says. It's a few thoughts on Delphi. So if you come across this live later, give it a listen and do me a favor before you go, like the video. What I brought up earlier is in the second motion to dismiss by the defense, there's only one defense attorney's name signed to it. Now, does it need both signatures? No. But when an attorney signs a document, a motion, or any type of any type of pretrial work, right? Whether it's civil, criminal, when an attorney submits it to the court, the signature says to the court that I attest that to the best of my knowledge, everything in this document is true. And I just thought that it was very interesting that all of the other motions submitted to the court had both attorneys named, but this particular motion only had the signature of one attorney. Now, listen, it could be just as simple as the other attorney was out of town. Maybe they were in a rush. I don't know. But I thought that was very curious because, in my opinion, the defense has made arguments that, to put politely, right, they're exaggerated. I read a lot of defense paperwork that talked about an alternate suspect and talked about the alternate suspect having Facebook photos that mimic the crime scene. And then I read in later paperwork that the defense is not able to access that photo. Does the defense know for a fact that the photo exists? And chain of custody matters. If the photo is taken directly right from this alternate alleged suspect, Brad Holder, if it's taken from his page by investigators, by forensic technologists, then the chain of custody, right, the defense can't question the chain of custody as much. But if, thank you, Susanna, but if, right, some random person, right, decided that they're going to also be an investigator and they are going to get the photos, right? Do you see where the chain of custody gets messed up? Because someone who's not legally trained to handle evidence may be the person who got the photo first. And if you're on the defense, you're going to make a big deal out of the interruption of the chain of custody. And it sounds like it's not a big deal, but it really is because the defense, listen, most of the times when the defense says, right, the police had tunnel vision, most of the time it's crap. I'm going to be honest with you. Most of the time when I've seen that as a defense, it's crap. But Judge Gull allowing the defense to name Brad Holder as a suspect without actually being able to produce a tangible link of Brad Holder to the actual crime, well, that's an appealable decision. That's an appealable decision. As a defense, no defense attorney, I mean, no prosecutor would allow that to happen. So what do I think the best thing for the defense to do, right? The defense will probably not be able to name Brad Holder. And I don't disagree with that decision. I think the court should have something tangible for another suspect to be named. I think that because the state is saying that the crime scene was staged, the defense can still possibly argue that the murders of Libby and Abby were ritualistic. They may not be able to name Brad Holder as a suspect, but the defense could probably use the way that the sticks are arranged at on the girls' bodies and around the girls' bodies at the crime scene to say the crime scene's not staged, that this is some sort of ritualistic murder. And there's no evidence that our client, Richard Allen, participates in any type of ritualistic organizations or religions, right? that would perpetuate violence. I think that the defense has an actual chance of convincing at least one juror that they can't trust the suspect, that the killer is Richard Allen, by saying that Delphi was inept, that what the FBI did compared what was left to Delphi police, that Delphi was inept. Why are there two different sketches of two different people? The first sketch is a man in his 20s. There's no there's no headgear on the man. The second sketch is of a middle-aged man. You've got one officer saying that these are the two different men. You've got another police officer saying that they're the same man. Either way it goes, it begs to question, why was there ever a sketch? I'm sorry, guys, if you can't tell. I'm feeding my dog kibble. Okay. So if I'm the defense, I would want to know what produced the sketch of the man who looks like he was in his 20s. Were there witnesses who said that they saw a man who looked to be in his mid late 20s on the bridge around the time that Abby and Libby were on the bridge? Because that's a way to introduce another possible viable suspect. If this sketch came from nowhere or came from powder, dust, it makes the police look inept. Investigators say that Richard Allen, that, he was lost in paperwork, that very soon after the murders, Allen was interviewed and described himself as wearing what Bridge Guy was wearing. And if I'm the defense, I would say if my client was guilty of murder, why readily admit that he was there that day? Did Richard Allen know that he would be seen, that his car would be seen on video? Richard Allen could have easily said, I don't remember what I was wearing. But the point is, there are things that the defense can use to make their client look cooperative, to insinuate that being cooperative, he had nothing to hide, that the two different sketches implies that there were witnesses or some sort of footage that gave police in Delphi the indication that there was a person of interest in his mid late 20s. And then there's how, when you have the help from the FBI and you formed a task force, Richard Allen's tip gets lost for for 5 years. Not to mention the fact that there were other people interviewed, and there's no record of these interviews. They were taped over. Brad Holder's interview was taped over. The defense should seek to ask if it could introduce that fact to the court, not Brad Holder's name, but the fact that his interview was taped over, not for the purpose of insinuating that Brad Holder committed the crime, but for the purpose of showing that the police in Delphi were inept in investigating the crime. So if you can't get evidence in one way, then attorneys try to get evidence in another way. And evidentiary rules, imagine a fishing net, and you put that fishing net in and you get all of these fish, right? But the fishing net has what in it? It has holes in it, and little fish squiggle out of those holes. That's how my evidence professor explained the exceptions to the hearsay rule. Well, a lot of evidence works that way. If you can't get the evidence in under one legal rule, then you can try to get the evidence in under another legal rule. And you say that the purpose of introducing the fact that interviews of potential persons of interest or suspects were accidentally taped over and over and over in the biggest crime that this small town has likely ever seen, you might have a chance of convincing at least one person on the jury that Delphi police, that they were inept. And if they're inept, they fingered the wrong guy. There's always the argument of pressure from a high profile case for the police to produce a suspect, right? And there might have been more pressure because it became a cold case. I really don't think that's the best way to go. I think that because of those, right, the vast difference in the two sketches, I think there's an argument that the defense can make that at least at one point in time, Delphi police believed that there was another person of interest, not Richard Allen, that was on that bridge and possibly harmed Libby and Abby. So I brought up the interview being taped over. I really think that the defense should have focused on the fact that there's no Miranda rights that can be heard. Sure, people can believe that Richard Allen just spilled this out to Dole and blah 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 blah. Well, you want to know what smart detectives have done to protect themselves? They've gotten they've gotten the person in front of a video camera or a tape recorder, read them their rights, and then said, "Now tell me what you want to tell me." Because I think the defense really should have leaned on the fact that they can't tell whether or not they're not there's no proof that Richard Allen was read his Miranda rights. That leaves the witness on the bridge. Well, there are always things about a witness, right? Richard Allen's car was on camera. Did this witness, right? Did she come forward before or after Richard Allen was named as a suspect? How old is she? Does she wear glasses? Did she tell anybody that she had walked past Abby and Libby close to February 14th? Because I think once I discovered that those girls were murdered, I think I immediately probably would have called police to say that I'd passed them on that bridge. And what she saw was him on the bridge, no other adult than the girls, right? So that means that in order to get around that witness, they've either got to play with the time frame or they've got to talk about how far away the girls were from Richard Allen, right? In the likelihood that no one else came along after Richard Allen walked away. She didn't say she saw Richard Allen talk to the girls. She didn't say that she saw him approach him. Now it's bad. It's bad. She puts him right on that bridge alone as the only adult with Abby and Libby. I'm not saying that this will work for the defense. I'm saying with what I do know, this is probably the best way to go. Point out everything that went wrong in that investigation and say that, you know what? Even though Delphi police have good intentions, the state has good intentions, they've got the wrong guy. The confessions. McClelland is a really good prosecutor, from what I can tell so far. And McClelland has said, whoa, Your Honor, if you're going to consider throwing out the confessions, instead of throwing out the confessions in their entirety, let's take every single confession and let's parse it and look at the circumstances. That way, if the court decides to throw out the confession, it may only decide to throw out parts of it, one of them, two of them. If the state can keep in one confession, that's very detrimental. False confessions have even been hard to get around. So him adding in that the girls were, you know, quote, molested, end quote. There may be people on the jury who believe that that was his intention or that that's what he did, and maybe the state just can't prove it. I'd like to hear in the comments what y'all think about the Aquafina water bottle that was taken from Richard Allen's house. Is there DNA? You know, when you think about it, we have a lot of hair on our bodies. You know, we have hair on our bodies, we have spittle that comes out of our mouth. And if someone stabs another human being, well, blood tends to fly everywhere. Hi again, Dr. Nikki. So I'm curious about that Aquafina water bottle, and I'm curious as to why ammunition was found in ammunition, that cartridges were found. And these cartridge there were multiple cartridges found, and these cartridges had bullets in them. But why is there one cartridge in a keepsake box? A keepsakes box is, to me, sounds like a place you keep memorabilia. I'm gonna tell you something. I'm critical of what do the FBI call it? Right, when they look at a crime and they tell you the type of person who did it, profiling. Before I worked wrongful defense, I was a forensic files fan until I actually started learning a lot about forensics. So when the FBI agent says in this type of crime, a culprit will sometimes keep a memory or a keepsake. Well, that FBI agent based that on his experience, not on profiling. And I thought about what the agent said in his experience. The killer would likely keep memorabilia. Could it be that the cartridge that he fires the round out of, he put in a keepsake box? And I'm going to tell you something. This was not a stranger that came through town. No, I do not see a stranger not familiar with that area thinking that he could pull that off in broad daylight. You love the ID channel, Dr. Nikki? I did until until law school. I just left all true crime after that. It ruined it for me. But so yeah, that keepsake box. That's interesting to me. The all of the knives that he's got, and his attorneys are saying, right, how could he take control of two girls? Nah. A gun can control a room full of people. And I think that because there was a round that went through the chamber, I think that he had to reiterate some sort of control, that he had to reiterate, I will hurt you. Could that have been when he told the girls to take off their clothes? Maybe they hesitated. Maybe he looked at their faces and could tell they might want to run. I think it's a waste of time to say that in this span of time that he could not have gotten across that river. That is not some huge river. I mean, Deer Creek runs a ways, right? But if you can look at some of the photos of the police out there waiting around and looking for evidence in the river. You know what I mean? Low tide, that river is barely hitting your knees. And the tide that day, everybody was tall enough to cross that river. What amazes me is how this was able to happen and nobody saw those girls disappear off of that trail. But how long does it take to get girls to walk down a steep incline? I'm back. Can you hear me, Dr. Nikki? Can you hear me? I think the sound is back. Whenever I exit the stage, I exited the stage so you all could see that photo behind me. Extremely remote. So yeah, I do hope the sound is back. But I just wanted to share a few things that I thought, I think the defense should go on everything that the police did wrong. They have good intentions, but they've got the wrong guy. And I do think that even though it's a murder trial, I think character witnesses are huge. I think if the defense can't find where he's, gotten into some weird fantasy, now they took computers out of the house. If there were weird fantasies about young girls, if there were problems in his marriage, this is the day before Valentine's Day, something that made him snap. You know what I mean? I think, but I think the defense can say he's never shown any sign of violence. Can the defense produce people to say, he's never ever, right? I've never been afraid to leave him alone around my daughters. But yeah, instead of focusing on naming Brad Holder, I think that the defense should really focus on the fact that the state is saying the crime scene is staged, and the defense should say, no, it is not. I don't think the defense is going to convince people that Richard Allen could not have done what he did, what he's accused of doing, in anywhere from 77 to 90 minutes. He had, reportedly a gun and a knife, and this is a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old girl. And the fact that Libby's phone was like found under her clothing, God bless the bravery in that child. I don't care what anybody says. She hid her phone. I believe she hid her phone. And yeah, I believe she started recording that guy because he creeped her out. But listen, can a witness say, right, he was creepy and you send somebody to prison over that? No, it's lots of things that creep teenage girls out. But in Libby and Abby's case, Libby, this guy, he's walking straight toward them. You look at that photo, that still photo, he's not walking in a relaxed manner. He's not smiling. He's not observing the nature around him. And Abby is walking toward Libby, and it looks like, she hasn't even noticed. So Libby got the first sight of this guy, and he's walking behind her friend girl. And I just want to know, if you were 14 years old, if you saw that man walking towards you, do you think that you would have had it in you to hurry up and get a 43-second video? Because if Richard Allen committed this murder, and Richard Allen is bridge guy, it's 14-year-old Liberty Libby German who solved the murders of herself and her best friend. It would have really been nice to see what both of those little girls would have been like as adults. So I'm sorry for the city of Delphi, and I'm sorry for the state of Indiana. And whoever took those two girls, they didn't just take them from Delphi and their families and Indiana and their classmates. They took them from the world. They took them from the world. And like I said, the purpose of a trial is to find the truth. And litigation, by its very nature, is adversarial. So the fight's already started. And let's hope that Richard Allen, let's hope he actually goes to trial in October. If he does, I'll be there, guys. I'll cover it. Thanks again, Dr. Nikki. Remember, if you stop by this video, hit the like button. Good night, everybody.